Picture two people pulling into the same grocery store parking lot. The first steps out of a 10-year-old sedan with faded paint and a few scratches around the doors. He grabs a homemade lunch from the passenger seat, locks the car, and walks inside without attracting a single glance. A few spaces away, another driver climbs out of a brand new luxury SUV, designer sneakers, expensive sunglasses, a watch that catches the sunlight. Everything about him announces success before he even speaks. Now here's the question. Which one is actually wealthy? Most people answer within seconds, and most people are wrong. The answer isn't the one most people expect. One of these individuals quietly built a net worth well above $2 million. The other is carrying monthly payments so heavy that missing just one paycheck would put everything at risk. That's the strange thing about real wealth. It rarely looks the way TV, movies, or social media taught us to expect. For years, we've been trained to believe that expensive cars, luxury brands, and oversized homes are proof that someone has made it. But genuine wealth usually leaves very different clues. The people who build lasting financial security often become experts at looking completely ordinary, not because they can't afford more, because they no longer need strangers to believe they can. That sounds unusual, but it happens far more often than people realize. Recent wealth studies continue to show that America is home to millions of millionaires, and that number keeps growing every year. If you walked into a busy coffee shop right now, there's a good chance someone sitting quietly with an old laptop and a plain cup of coffee has a seven-figure net worth. You probably wouldn't notice them. You might even assume they were struggling financially, and that's exactly why quiet wealth is so easy to miss. That's because real wealth isn't designed to attract attention, it's designed to create freedom. Over the next several parts, we're going to uncover 10 surprisingly reliable signs that reveal when someone is genuinely wealthy, even if they appear completely average on the outside. Before we even reach the first sign, there's one simple idea that changes everything. Because until you understand the difference between earning money and keeping it, the truly wealthy will remain almost impossible to recognize. Before we look at the first sign, there's one misunderstanding that fools almost everyone. Most people confuse income with wealth. At first glance, they seem like the same thing. They're not. Income is the money that enters your life. Wealth is the money that stays. Someone earning $400,000 a year can still be financially fragile if every dollar disappears into mortgages, car payments, vacations, and credit cards. On the other hand, someone making a much more ordinary salary can quietly build a fortune by consistently keeping a portion of every paycheck. That's why appearances are so misleading. Income is easy to display. Wealth is almost invisible. Imagine two neighbors. One spends Saturday morning washing a brand new luxury SUV in the driveway. The other quietly reviews his investment account at the kitchen table before driving his 12-year-old sedan to the grocery store. One receives compliments from the neighborhood. The other quietly watches his net worth grow. Think about social media. You can post a photo beside a luxury car. You can show a 5-star vacation. You can film yourself walking through an expensive home. But no one uploads a picture of an index fund that's been growing for 20 years. No one gets thousands of likes for quietly maxing out their retirement account. The habits that actually create wealth rarely make exciting content. They're repetitive, patient, almost boring. That's exactly why so many people overlook them. Yet those ordinary decisions compound into extraordinary results. That's why many financially successful people stop trying to impress others. They understand something most people never learn. Every dollar spent trying to look wealthy is one less dollar actually becoming wealthy. They'd rather own appreciating assets than expensive appearances. They'd rather have investments generating income than possessions demanding payments. It's not just a different way of spending, it's a completely different way of thinking. Instead of asking, will people be impressed? They ask, will this improve my financial future? That single question changes almost every spending decision they make. And once you understand that mindset, the first sign becomes surprisingly obvious, because the easiest place to spot the difference between someone who looks rich and someone who actually is sitting right there in the parking lot. The vehicle they drive often reveals far more about their financial habits than most people realize, and what you'll discover next may completely change the way you look at expensive cars forever. If you want to misunderstand someone's financial life in under 5 seconds, just look at the car they drive. It's one of the most common mistakes people make. A luxury SUV pulls into a parking lot, and we immediately assume success. An older Honda or Toyota arrives, and we quietly assume the opposite. But reality is often very different. Many financially secure people intentionally drive cars that reveal almost nothing about their wealth. Why? Because they see a car in a completely different way. For most people, a car is both transportation and a statement. For someone focused on building wealth, it's simply a tool. Its purpose is straightforward. Start reliably, get them where they need to go, and cost as little as possible over time. nothing more. That's why brands like Toyota, Honda, Subaru, and Ford are so common among self-made millionaires. Not because those are the only cars they can afford, because those are the cars that make sense. Now imagine two neighbors. One finances a brand new luxury SUV with a monthly payment close to $1,000. The other buys a reliable used sedan, keeps it for over a decade, and invests the difference. At first glance, the luxury vehicle looks like the better choice, but fast forward 10 years, one asset lost value every single year. The other quietly grew while nobody was paying attention. 10 years later, one neighbor is still making payments. The other has options. That's the difference between buying for appearance and buying for freedom. Every month, a car becomes a little older. Every year, an investment has the chance to become a little stronger. One steadily loses value. The other has the potential to build it. People who understand this don't avoid nice cars because they can't afford them. They avoid them because they understand the trade-off. They choose to own more of what grows and less of what fades. Ironically, the faded paint, the older model, and the high mileage that many people overlook may actually signal discipline, not struggle. Sometimes the car that looks the least impressive is carrying the driver who's closest to financial freedom. If their choice of car surprises you, wait until you see where genuinely wealthy people choose to live, because their homes tell an equally unexpected story. Most people expect wealth to show up in someone's address. A bigger house, a better neighborhood, a driveway lined with expensive cars. From the outside, it looks like success. But behind those front doors, the financial reality is often very different. Many families stretch themselves thin just to afford the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and constant repairs. The house stops feeling like a place to live, starts feeling like a bill that never goes away. People assume they're building wealth because they own an expensive property, but in many cases, they're simply carrying a larger payment. People who quietly build wealth approach this decision differently. Instead of asking, what's the biggest house I can qualify for? They ask, what's the smallest house that still gives my family everything we truly need? That shift may sound minor. Financially, it's massive. Imagine two families earning the exact same income. The first buys a house right at the edge of what the bank approves. The second chooses a comfortable home well below their limit. Every month, one family spends nearly everything just to keep the house. The other has money left to invest. One Saturday, the first family turns down a weekend trip because the mortgage payment is due. The second family packs the car and leaves without thinking twice. The difference wasn't income, it was breathing room. Year after year, that gap quietly widens. While one family is constantly trying to keep up with rising expenses, the other steadily builds assets that continue working for them. Ironically, many self-made millionaires spend decades living in the same modest homes. Not because they can't afford something bigger, because they stopped chasing appearances long ago. Visitors often assume they never upgraded because they couldn't. The truth is, they simply stopped feeling the need to them. A home isn't a trophy. It's a place to live while the house stays the same. Their investments quietly keep growing in retirement accounts, businesses, and savings that most people never see. That's why some of the most expensive neighborhoods aren't always filled with the wealthiest people. Sometimes they're filled with the largest monthly obligations. Meanwhile, real wealth is being built quietly on ordinary streets, behind ordinary front doors. Once you start to see that, another pattern becomes clear, because the next clue isn't parked in the driveway or sitting on the front lawn. It's something people wear every single day, and it often hides wealth better than anything else. Walk into a busy airport, a shopping mall, or a nice restaurant. Without realizing it, you'll probably start making assumptions about people. The expensive sneakers, the luxury handbag, the designer logo stretched across a sweatshirt, the polished watch peeking out from under a sleeve. Our brains naturally connect these things with wealth, but genuine wealth often dresses very differently. Many financially successful people wear clothes that reveal almost nothing about their income. Simple colors, comfortable shoes, well-made basics, no oversized logos, no obvious designer branding, not because they dislike quality, because they no longer feel the need to advertise it. Picture two coworkers arriving at the same meeting. One walks in wearing designer labels from head to toe. Everything about them is polished, intentional, and impossible to ignore. The other arrives quietly. A plain blue sweater, simple shoes, an old leather watch that's been worn for years. Nothing about them stands out. By the end of the year, only one of them quietly reaches financial independence. And it isn't the one everyone noticed first. That's one of the biggest mindset shifts that comes with financial security. When people are still trying to prove they've made it, they often buy visible status. When they actually become financially independent, the desire to impress strangers begins to disappear. Think about it. If you already know your investments are growing every month, if your bills are comfortably covered, if your future feels secure, why would you need a logo to convince someone else you're successful? You wouldn't. Instead, you stop asking, will people notice this? And start asking, will I still enjoy this 5 years from now? For durability, for value, a high-quality jacket that lasts 10 years becomes far more attractive than a trendy one that needs replacing every season. A dependable pair of shoes matters more than the brand printed on the side. This doesn't mean wealthy people never purchase luxury items. Some certainly do. The difference is motivation. They're buying because they genuinely enjoy the product, not because they're hoping strangers will notice it. Ironically, the loudest displays of wealth often come from people who can least afford them. The quietest people in the room are sometimes the ones with the healthiest bank accounts. Confidence no longer comes from what they're wearing. It comes from knowing they don't have to impress anyone. Real confidence rarely needs an audience, and neither does real wealth. That's why the next sign catches so many people off guard, because it isn't something you can see at all. In fact, you'll only notice it if you're paying close attention to the conversation. The genuinely wealthy often reveal themselves not by what they say, but by what they choose not to talk about. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to bring money into almost every conversation? They'll mention what they paid for their vacation, how much their renovation cost, the size of their bonus, the price of their new watch. Sometimes they aren't even trying to brag. They simply want everyone around them to know they're doing well. Now pay attention to someone who is genuinely wealthy. Most of the time you'll notice the exact opposite. They rarely volunteer financial details, they don't announce their salary, they don't compare investment returns, they don't casually mention the price tag on everything they own. In fact, if you spent an entire afternoon with them, you might leave without having the slightest idea how much money they actually have. Imagine two friends having dinner. One spends the evening talking about stock tips, bonuses, and the price of his new watch. The other asks about family, travel, books, and future plans. Months later, you discover the quieter friend is worth 10 times as much. You just never had a reason to guess. Why? Because money has stopped being part of their identity. Think about something that's completely normal in your life. You probably don't tell people how much you paid for your refrigerator or your internet bill. Those things simply exist in the background. For many wealthy people, money works the same way. It's an important tool, but it isn't an interesting topic. There's another reason they stay quiet. Talking openly about wealth often creates problems. They've seen friendships become awkward. They've watched expectations quietly change, so they stopped discussing money altogether. People compare, people judge. Some relationships become uncomfortable, others become transactional. Rather than inviting those situations, many financially successful people simply keep their finances private, not because they're hiding something, because they're protecting their peace. They've learned that silence often creates fewer complications than explanation. Ironically, the louder someone is about appearing successful, the more likely they're seeking validation. People who already feel financially secure rarely need approval from strangers. Their confidence comes from numbers no one else can see. The brokerage account, the emergency fund, the paid-off investments, not from conversations designed to impress a dinner table. They don't need people to believe they're wealthy. They already know they are. And here's where the story takes another unexpected turn. Because while most people spend enormous amounts of time talking about money, the genuinely wealthy spend far more time quietly putting their money to work. And that's the next sign. The one almost nobody notices until decades have already passed. Here's one of the biggest differences between people who look wealthy and people who actually become wealthy. The first group spends money, the second group puts money to work. From the outside, you can't see the difference. There's no luxury logo, no flashy purchase, no social media post announcing what happened, but behind the scenes, something powerful is taking place every payday. Before the money has a chance to be spent, part of it is already moving somewhere else. Into retirement accounts, investment portfolios, index funds, health savings accounts, college funds, assets that quietly grow year after year without demanding attention. This habit may sound simple, but over decades, it changes everything. Imagine two coworkers earning the exact same salary every payday. The first person spends whatever remains after paying bills. If there's money left at the end of the month, they might invest it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The second coworker reverses the process. The moment their paycheck arrives, investments happen automatically. The money is transferred before they even have the opportunity to spend it. A year later, one coworker stands in line for coffee and casually opens their investment app. They notice another quiet step forward. They pause for a second, almost surprised. Then they lock their phone, step forward, and order like nothing happened. No celebration, no announcement, just quiet progress. Whatever remains becomes their spending budget. The difference feels small. After 1 month, it barely matters. After 10 years, it's enormous. After 30 years, the gap can become life-changing. This is why so many self-made millionaires appear ordinary. Their wealth isn't sitting in the driveway. It isn't hanging in the closet. It isn't wrapped around their wrist. It's quietly compounding inside accounts that almost nobody else ever sees. And here's another interesting detail. Many wealthy investors don't constantly chase the next hot stock or trending investment. They buy solid, diversified investments. They contribute consistently. Then they let time do most of the heavy lifting. It's boring, predictable, almost invisible. That's exactly why so many people underestimate its power. But boring habits often create extraordinary results because real wealth rarely comes from one brilliant financial decision. It usually comes from thousands of ordinary decisions repeated with remarkable consistency. The miracle isn't one perfect investment. It's giving good investments enough time to grow. And once someone has built those investments for years, another pattern begins to appear. One that becomes obvious the moment you ask a simple question. Who do you owe money to? The answer often reveals far more about someone's financial life than their income ever could. One of the fastest ways to understand someone's financial life isn't by asking how much they earn. It's by asking a much simpler question. How much of their future income already belongs to someone else? Think about the average paycheck. Before many people even receive it, a large portion has already been spoken for. The mortgage, the car payment, credit card bills, personal loans, buy now, pay later plans, monthly subscriptions by the time the money arrives, much of it is already committed. That creates pressure. The pressure to keep earning, the pressure to never miss a payment, the pressure to stay in a job simply because the bills leave no room for choice. Financially secure people usually move in the opposite direction. They don't necessarily avoid debt completely, but they're extremely selective about it. If they use credit cards, they're often paying the balance in full every month, not because they dislike rewards, because they refuse to pay high interest for yesterday's purchases. They understand something many people overlook. Interest works in two directions. When you invest, compound interest helps build wealth. When you carry expensive debt, that same force quietly works against you. Every month, you carry high interest debt. Part of your paycheck quietly starts working for the bank instead of for you. That's why many wealthy people eliminate high interest debt as quickly as possible. The fewer payments they owe, the more freedom they keep. One afternoon, two coworkers received the same unexpected email. Their company is cutting jobs. Both read the message in silence. One feels their chest tighten instantly. Their mind races through bills, due dates, and obligations. The other pauses and takes a slow breath, not because losing a job is easy, but because they know they have time to search, time to think, time to choose their next step without panic. That's what low debt actually buys. Not luxury, not status, but space. Imagine two people earning identical salaries. One spends every month making payments to lenders. The other has very few financial obligations beyond normal living expenses. Who has more flexibility? Who can leave a stressful job? Who can survive an unexpected emergency? Who sleeps better at night? The answer has very little to do with income and almost everything to do with ownership. Real wealth isn't measured only by what you own. Sometimes it's measured by what no one else owns of yours, because every payment you eliminate gives you another piece of your future back. And once that financial pressure begins to disappear, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting emotionally when life becomes expensive. Instead, you stay calm. That calm may be one of the clearest signs that someone has quietly built real wealth. Freedom doesn't always arrive with more income. Sometimes it arrives with fewer payments. Life has a way of testing your finances when you least expect it. The car breaks down on a Monday morning. The air conditioner stops working during the hottest week of summer. A medical bill arrives that insurance doesn't fully cover, or a company announces layoffs with almost no warning. For many families, one unexpected expense is enough to throw everything into chaos, not because they're irresponsible, because they've been living with almost no financial margin. Every dollar already has a job, so when a surprise bill appears, there isn't an extra dollar waiting to handle it. That's when panic takes over. Credit cards come out, loans become the emergency plan, stress replaces sleep. Now compare that to someone who has quietly built wealth over many years. The same unexpected bill arrives, the same problem needs to be solved, but the reaction is completely different. One evening, two homeowners hear the same loud bang from their basement. Their water heaters have failed. One immediately grabs a credit card, already calculating how long it will take to pay it off. The other quietly opens their emergency fund, pays for the repair, and goes back to dinner. By bedtime, both homes have hot water again. Only one person is still lying awake worrying about the bill. There's no panic, no desperate search for money, no fear that one repair will destroy the month's budget. The emergency stayed a problem, it never became a crisis. Why? Because they prepared long before the emergency happened. They understand that emergencies aren't rare events, they're inevitable. So instead of hoping nothing goes wrong, they build a financial cushion that allows life to happen without creating a crisis. Many financially secure people keep several months of living expenses in an easily accessible emergency fund. Not because they expect disaster every week, because they value peace of mind. That cash isn't sitting there doing nothing. It's quietly protecting every investment they've already built. It prevents them from selling investments during bad markets. It keeps them from relying on high-interest debt. Most importantly, it buys them time. Time to make smart decisions instead of emotional ones. That's the hidden value of financial security. It doesn't eliminate problems. It changes how you experience them. A flat tire becomes an inconvenience instead of a catastrophe. A temporary job loss becomes a challenge instead of a disaster. Prepared people don't avoid surprises, they avoid panic. And once someone reaches that level of stability, another fascinating habit begins to appear. They stop buying things simply because they're cheap. Instead, they become incredibly intentional about buying things that last. That single habit quietly saves them far more money than most people ever realize. At first glance, this habit can be confusing. Someone who is genuinely wealthy often spends more on certain purchases than everyone else. A better pair of boots, a solid dining table, a dependable washing machine, a well-built office chair. To an outsider, it may look like they're wasting money. In reality, they're doing the exact opposite. They've learned to measure cost over years, not days. Imagine two people buying the same everyday item. The first chooses the cheapest option available because the price tag looks attractive. The second spends more on a version built to last 10 years later. Both families are getting ready for dinner. One is scrolling online, searching for yet another replacement after their third table started wobbling. The other is wiping down the same sturdy table they've had for years. It's hosted birthdays, late-night conversations, homework sessions, and quiet meals. It still works. It still looks good. And without anyone noticing, it has become part of the family's story. For the first few months, the cheaper purchase seems like the smarter decision. Then it breaks, so they replace it. A year later, they replace it again. Eventually, they've spent more than the person who bought the quality version in the first place. The wealthy understand this pattern. They're not trying to buy expensive things. They're trying to avoid buying the same thing multiple times. That's why you'll often find older possessions in their homes. Furniture they've owned for 15 years, kitchen appliances that still work perfectly, luggage that's traveled the world, shoes repaired instead of thrown away. They don't replace something simply because a newer version exists. They replace it when it no longer serves its purpose. That mindset quietly saves thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Even more importantly, it reduces decision fatigue. Less shopping, less replacing, less chasing trends, more time living. This approach also changes the way they think about maintenance. Instead of immediately replacing something broken, they first ask a different question. Can this be repaired? A simple repair often costs a fraction of a replacement. Over decades, those decisions compound into substantial savings. Ironically, what many people mistake for being cheap is often long-term financial intelligence. Because wealthy people understand that value isn't determined by the lowest price, it's determined by the lowest lifetime cost. Cheap often saves money today. Quality often saves money for years. And once you've mastered that habit, another one naturally follows. You become remarkably comfortable saying one small word that many people struggle to say, no. And that single word protects more wealth than almost any investment strategy ever could. One of the most powerful financial habits isn't an investment strategy. It isn't a budgeting app. It isn't even a high-paying career. It's the ability to say one simple word, no. For many people, that word feels surprisingly difficult. A friend invites them on an expensive weekend trip. They don't really want to spend the money, but they say yes anyway. A new phone launches, the old one works perfectly still. They convince themselves it's time for an upgrade. Co-workers start buying luxury watches, neighbors renovate their homes, friends trade in their cars. Little by little, they begin spending simply to avoid feeling left behind. This is how life lifestyle inflation quietly takes control, not through one massive purchase, but through hundreds of small decisions driven by comparison instead of necessity. Financially secure people learn to recognize this trap. They understand that every yes costs more than money. It also costs future opportunities. Every unnecessary expense is money that can't be invested, money that can't earn returns, money that can't buy future freedom. That's why wealthy people become remarkably comfortable declining things that don't align with their priorities. They skip the vacation they don't truly want. One Friday evening, a group of friends plans an expensive weekend getaway. One person politely declines. For a moment, they wonder if they made the wrong decision. 6 months later, that same money becomes the final piece of their emergency fund. The trip is forgotten. The peace of mind isn't. They pass on the newest gadget. They ignore trends that everyone else seems excited about. Not because they're depriving themselves, because they're protecting something far more valuable: choice. The ability to decide because you want to, not because your finances force you to. Imagine receiving a substantial raise at work. Many people immediately increase their spending. A nicer apartment, a newer vehicle, more expensive restaurants. Within months, the higher income feels normal. The extra money disappears. People who quietly build wealth often do the opposite. Their income grows, their lifestyle barely changes. Instead, the difference flows into investments, retirement accounts, and savings. To friends and family, they may appear surprisingly modest. Some may even call them cheap. But years later, those same people are often amazed by the financial freedom they've built. The truth is simple. Every meaningful financial goal requires saying no to something else. Every no today quietly becomes another yes for your future. Those small decisions repeated consistently over decades create a life that looks ordinary from the outside, but extraordinary on the inside, because once you've stopped trying to impress other people, something remarkable happens. You discover that real wealth was never about appearances at all. And that's exactly where the final sign brings this entire story together. This may be the biggest clue of all. At some point, people who build real wealth go through a quiet transformation. They stop caring about looking wealthy, not because they lost ambition, not because they suddenly dislike nice things, because they no longer need external proof that they're successful. Think about someone who is deeply confident in a skill. They don't constantly tell everyone how good they are. Their confidence speaks for itself. Money works the same way. People who are financially secure rarely feel the need to advertise it. They don't chase compliments. They don't buy things simply to be noticed. And they don't measure success by how strangers react to them. Instead, they begin valuing things that can't be photographed. The freedom to leave a stressful job, the ability to take months off without worrying about bills, helping their children through college without creating debt, supporting aging parents when they need it, taking a Wednesday afternoon off simply because they feel like it. Imagine walking through a quiet park on a Wednesday afternoon. Children are still in school. Most people are sitting in offices, but one older couple is taking a slow walk together. No rush, no meetings, no financial worries pulling them back. Nobody notices them. Yet that ordinary afternoon may be one of the greatest luxuries wealth can buy. These moments never go viral online, yet they're often worth far more than any luxury purchase. That's the irony. The longer someone builds wealth, the less interested they become in proving they have it. Status becomes less important. Freedom becomes everything. That's the moment money stops being something you show and starts becoming something you feel. You'll notice this in conversations. They're rarely trying to impress anyone. You'll notice it in their spending. Every purchase has a purpose. Not to impress other people, but to improve their life. You'll notice it in their daily life. They move with a quiet confidence that doesn't depend on expensive possessions. Because confidence built on money in the bank lasts much longer than confidence built on someone else's opinion. Eventually, the race to impress people simply loses its appeal. And that's when many people unknowingly mistake them for being ordinary. But underneath that ordinary appearance is something extraordinary. Years of disciplined decisions, years of patience, years of choosing long-term freedom over short-term attention. When you connect this final sign with everything we've discussed so far, one powerful truth begins to emerge. Looking rich and becoming rich are completely different games. The people who win the second one almost always stop playing the first. But before we finish, there's one final lesson that explains why these 10 signs matter far more than they appear, and it changes the entire way you think about wealth. Now step back forget the old car, forget the modest house, forget the plain clothes and the quiet conversations about money. At first glance, these seem like 10 separate habits, but they're not. They're all connected by one invisible pattern. Every financially successful person eventually reaches a point where they stop asking one question: what will make me look successful? And they replace it with a far more powerful one: what will make me financially free? That single shift quietly reshapes almost every decision they make. A flashy car loses its appeal because they see the investment it replaces. A luxury watch becomes harder to justify because they understand what that money could grow into over time. A bigger house stops feeling like a symbol of success, starts looking like a long-term obligation competing with future freedom. This is where most people misunderstand wealth. They assume wealthy people buy expensive things because they have money, but in many cases, wealthy people have money because they spent years choosing not to buy expensive things. That's a completely different mindset. Instead of chasing appearances, they quietly build options. The option to retire early, the option to change careers, the option to start something new, the option to support the people they care about without financial strain. Money becomes less about consumption and more about flexibility. Imagine two people waking up on the same Monday morning. One has to go to work because missing a paycheck isn't an option. The other goes because they still enjoy what they do. That's the quiet difference years of smart financial decisions can create. One works from necessity, the other works from choice. That's what flexibility really looks like. That's why many millionaires don't seem obsessed with luxury. They're obsessed with independence. Because independence is the one luxury that makes every other luxury optional. Once you've experienced that level of freedom, impressing strangers becomes one of the least interesting ways to use your money. And here's something even more surprising. None of these habits require an extraordinary income. Most of them can begin with ordinary financial decisions made consistently over many years, which raises an important question. If these people weren't born understanding how money works, where did they learn it? The answer isn't what most people expect, because the answer explains why so many hardworking people struggle financially despite earning decent incomes. And once you understand that missing piece, everything we've discussed suddenly fits together. At this point, you might be thinking, maybe these people simply earned more money. It's a reasonable assumption, but it's also one of the most misleading ideas about wealth. Yes, a higher income can help. No one is arguing against that, but income alone has never guaranteed financial stability. There are countless examples of athletes, celebrities, executives, and entrepreneurs who earned millions and still ended up with nothing. At the same time, there are teachers, electricians, nurses, mechanics, and small business owners who quietly built lasting wealth. So what separates them? It isn't luck, it isn't perfect timing, and it certainly isn't lifestyle. It's understanding how money actually works. People who build wealth eventually learn lessons that most schools never teach. They understand that debt can either support your future or quietly drain it. They recognize that investing isn't about quick wins. It's about giving time the chance to multiply your efforts. They learn that taxes matter, fees matter, compound growth matters, and small, consistent habits matter more than anything else. One decision rarely changes your life, but thousands of repeated decisions absolutely do. That's why financially successful people rely on systems instead of motivation. Savings happen automatically, investments happen automatically, good financial habits become routine instead of requiring constant willpower, bills are organized. Spending has clear limits. The fewer daily financial decisions they have to make, the fewer costly mistakes they make over time. Imagine two paychecks arriving on the same Friday morning. One slowly disappears over the weekend. Dinner out, online shopping. A few impulse purchases by Monday, almost nothing is left. The other paycheck quietly moves money into savings and investments before a single dollar is spent. Nothing exciting happens that weekend, but 20 years later, everything looks completely different. That's the power of systems. Think of it this way. Two people can earn the exact same paycheck. One spends first and saves whatever happens to remain. The other saves first and learns to live on the rest. 20 years later, their lives can look completely different. Not because one worked harder, because one followed a system while the other followed emotion. Systems stay consistent even on the days motivation disappears. That's the hidden lesson behind every sign we've discussed. Real wealth isn't built through one brilliant financial move. It's built through ordinary habits repeated long enough for compound growth to take over. Once you understand that, one final question remains. If these habits are available to almost anyone, why do so few people actually follow them? The answer brings this entire story full circle, and it may be the most important lesson of all. If these habits are so simple, why doesn't everyone follow them? It's a fair question. After all, none of the 10 signs we've discussed require winning the lottery. Most don't require an extraordinary salary. So why do so many people spend decades chasing wealth without ever finding it? The answer has less to do with intelligence and far more to do with human nature. Our brains are wired to value today more than tomorrow. A new car feels real today. A growing investment account feels invisible. Buying something exciting creates an immediate emotional reward. Investing creates almost no emotional reward at all. Imagine two coworkers receiving the same annual bonus. One celebrates by buying the newest phone that weekend. The other quietly invests the money and keeps using the phone they already own. By Monday, one has something exciting to show. The other has nothing new at all. 20 years later, only one of those decisions is still paying dividends. In fact, it often feels like you're giving something up. That's why patience feels so ordinary in the moment and so extraordinary decades later. And patience is exactly what wealth demands. Every financially successful person reaches moments where short-term pleasure competes with long-term freedom. The vacation or the investment, the luxury car or the paid-off one, the bigger house or the growing portfolio, the expensive upgrade or another year of financial progress, those decisions rarely feel dramatic. Most are small, almost forgettable. Let's go back to where this journey began. Picture that parking lot one more time. On one side sits the person driving the luxury SUV. Everything about them appears successful. The expensive clothes, the polished image, the lifestyle that turns heads. A few spaces away is someone climbing out of an older sedan. The paint has faded, the car has seen better days, their lunch came from home. Nothing about them demands attention. Now imagine you could see one thing neither person can hide. Not their car, not their clothes, not their neighborhood, their financial statement. Suddenly, the entire story changes. One person owns impressive possessions, the other owns impressive freedom. One spends every month protecting an expensive lifestyle, the other spends every month expanding their choices. That's the difference these 16 parts have been pointing toward all along. Real wealth isn't built to impress strangers, it's built to remove worry. It's waking up without fearing the next bill, it's having enough savings to handle life surprises without panic, it's being able to leave a job that no longer makes you happy, it's helping the people you love without creating financial stress for yourself. It's buying time instead of buying attention. Imagine an ordinary Tuesday morning years from now, you wake up without checking your bank balance before making coffee. You don't rush out the door because you're afraid of falling behind. You simply begin the day with something money can never directly buy: peace. That's why so many genuinely wealthy people appear completely ordinary. They've already achieved the thing everyone else is still trying to prove. They no longer need expensive symbols because they already have something better: peace of mind, freedom, control over their future. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Looking wealthy and becoming wealthy are two completely different skills. One depends on appearances, the other depends on patience. One creates admiration, the other creates independence. If you remember only one thing from this entire video, let it be this: every dollar has two possible jobs. It can help you look successful today, or it can quietly help you become financially free tomorrow. The choice seems small in the moment, but repeated over years, it determines almost everything. So the next time you see someone driving an old car, wearing plain clothes, or living a modest life, don't rush to judge their financial situation. They might not be struggling at all. They might simply understand something the rest of the world is still trying to learn, because in the end, the richest person in the room is rarely the one attracting the most attention. More often, it's the one who no longer needs it.